Hello and welcome to coverage of Grand Prix Seattle-Tacoma. I'm Marshall Sutcliffe in the booth with Ian Duke, and it is time for the semifinals. Ian, it's been a long road for a lot of these players. You know, these weekends can really grind out, especially depending on what kind of matchups you get. And we have found ourselves finally in the semifinals. That's Christian Calcano. And Christian's playing Grixis Delver, and he has been on a tear this tournament, just kind of working his way right up the chain here.
Yeah, for sure.
That's his opponent there, Chase Hansen, who's playing Reanimator.
That's right. So Calcano starts off with a turn 1 Utaxian Probe, kind of his signature special move this tournament. We've seen him do it a lot. It's led to some pretty spectacular sequencing on his part, just having so much information to use cards like Stifle and Wasteland to the fullest of their effect. He gets a look at Chase's hand. We do see an Animate Dead and a Reanimate in there with Hapless Researcher, one of those kind of maybe unusual cards.
Yeah, that is a card we do not see that often.
Yeah, it used to be popular. I remember seeing it like 6-7 years ago in Reanimator lists, but it's maybe less popular now than it was then, but still a pretty cool addition there. It's got a lot of utility. So obviously...
Including the beatdown?
Including the beatdown, gets in there for 1. Obviously, the main utility here is as a discard outlet to get your reanimation targets in your graveyard, but it does a couple other things as well. It can guard your single big threat against an Edict effect like Liliana of the Veil.
Right, good point.
It can get rid of your opponent's bridges from below if you're playing against Dredge. So, you know, we've seen various different things here, even just sometimes trades.
Great points. Also, beatdown. I mean,
Also
sometimes they
beatdown.
just have it all, right? Turn 1 and turn 2 Hapless Researcher. What is Calcano supposed to do in the face of such tyranny?
We will see.
I'm sure he has a plan. Deathrite Shaman.
That's a nice one.
The blank. Just bricks it.
Yeah. Deathrite Shaman, obviously very strong against Reanimator deck. Chase Hansen with plenty of lands and reanimation spells, but no creature to get into the graveyard yet. And also now needs to worry about that Deathrite Shaman. He has no answer to it, and it is going to be virtually impossible for him to reanimate a creature as long as that Deathrite Shaman stays active.
Would have been pretty hasty, but is there something to be said for him that turn, starting to sacrifice his Hapless Researchers in the hopes of finding something big and then discarding it with the other one?
Yeah, there is something to be said for that.
The window's closing quickly here.
That would be a very all-in play,
Yeah,
though.
super all-in. Though, it's tough right now, right? Because that Deathrite Shaman is just going to sit there.
It's true. I mean, Chase's deck is a little bit more resilient to Deathrite Shaman than some other more all-in reanimators we've seen. He has 3 copies of Izzet Charm, which can actually just outright kill a Deathrite Shaman. He has reanimation targets that he's maybe slightly more prepared to hardcast than some of the other reanimator decks. Like, he could, I mean, he's got plenty of lands in his hand. He could conceivably get up to Grizzlebrand or Tidespout Tyrant or something along those lines.
Yeah, so what are his big payoffs here as far as getting cards back?
Getting card...
you know, what is he going to reanimate here? That's
his reanimation targets, yeah. So Grizzlebrand is obviously the big one. That's kind of the go-to target that trumps most. The other ones play more utility roles. Iona, Shield of Emeria, can shut off a color of spells from your opponent. Elish Norn, fantastic against any creature deck, and actually shuts off just about all of Christian Calcano's deck. So Elish Norn would be a great one. Tidespout Tyrant can bounce permanents when you cast spells, and Archetype of Endurance is another unique one here with Hexproof, and giving your other creatures Hexproof as well. Protect against targeted removal. So the big ones in this matchup are probably Grizzlebrand and Elish Norn.
Okay. Now, what about the board state as it sits now? Who does this favor?
Definitely, if you include in the board state the known information about hands, Christian Calcano for sure.
Okay.
I mean, having an active Deathrite Shaman, you're almost always automatically in good shape against Reanimator. The Hapless Researchers aren't really doing a lot right now. And Chase Hansen is really just kind of sitting around until he can find some card selection and maybe draw into Izzet Charms. Although now there's a second Deathrite Shaman there as well. So Calcano looks to be in good shape.
Is that a Careful Study in his hand?
Yeah, it appears to be.
Okay.
So that's a little bit of card selection, but I mean, often you want to hold your Careful Study until you actually have the creature you want to discard. Things get a little more complicated here because of the Deathrite Shaman, so it's possible we'll see that Careful Study just get fired off for card disadvantage, but just to try to dig to something to make a move sooner rather than later.
All right, now this is trouble here for Chase because Wasteland takes out his only green source, and now Christian Calcano is mounting a serious offensive here. Whoa, wow. How is this turn?
Pretty big. So double Delver of Secrets and Gurmag Angler still leaving up Deathrite Shaman with green mana to threaten to remove a creature. And this is going to set up potentially a 2-turn clock on Calcano's part.
That was an Entomb off the top there for Chase.
Entomb is a nice pickup. So what Entomb lets Chase do is if he can get 2 creatures into the graveyard this turn and cast 2 reanimate spells, I mean, that's such a stretch, though. I don't think he is going to have enough mana to do that. I mean, he has the 2 reanimate spells, but he has reanimate plus animate dead, which is 3 mana total, and that won't leave him with enough mana to get. Well, he could.
Unless he careful studied for exactly 2 threats, right?
2 threats, or he could entomb 1 threat into the graveyard and sack both his Hapless Researchers and find another one.
Okay.
Then cast a reanimate spell, let Deathrite Shaman counter it, and then cast another reanimate spell, and finally stick a threat. But that's obviously.
This is a stretch, yeah.
That's obviously a stretch. It looks like he just goes ahead and passes it back
to
Christian Calcano,
who flipped both Delvers there off of a Stifle.
Okay.
And is now crunching into the red zone for big chunks of damage here. And it looks like Chase wants to block the Gurmag Angler here.
So one really interesting thing is I just pulled up the Oracle text for Animate Dead, and it looks like you can actually stifle Animate Dead as an enter the battlefield trigger. So even if it's not needed this game, that's something we could potentially see in this matchup here.
There's a misdirection hitting the bin, and here's an Entomb now from Chase Hansen.
So Chase finally making a move now that he's virtually forced to.
We'll note here, are there any lands in graveyards right now? No, right?
I do not believe so.
So the Deathrite, there's only one Deathrite is active at the moment.
Mm-hmm.
He went and got Grizzlebrand. Now, is this bait? Because we do know he has 2 different reanimation spells. Like you said, he's got Reanimate and Animate Dead here.
Yeah, I mean, the trouble is Calcano waits till he casts 1 and then respawns with the Deathrite activation.
Right.
So he needs both 2 reanimate spells and 2 reanimate targets, I think.
Right, and because I mean, I think the one he wants here is Elishnorn, right? That would wipe the board and stabilize it all in one swing.
Yeah. Everything but the Gurmag Angler, at least.
Yeah, but it's still stable, right? Because
Yeah.
it's a 4/7 versus a 3/3. So. All right, this is careful study now for Chase Hansen. This is a big turn for him.
And there is the Elishnorn.
Really?
Yeah, I think so. Looks like a white card that costs a bunch of mana, so that's the only one I can think of.
It's Iona. The other white card that costs a bunch of mana.
Yeah, okay.
He got you.
So I guess Iona is the bait here, and then you hope to resolve Grizzlebrand after that?
Grizzlebrand stops the attacks too.
Yeah, there's the Stifle and the Animate Dead.
Yeah, good call, Ian.
Animate Dead, a strange card.
So weird.
If you actually read, especially this is, I think, an alpha or a beta Animate Dead, the words just make no sense, Marshall.
No.
It's just not, it's just gibberish.
No,
so you actually have to look it up in Oracle, and it turns out it's this weird enchantment that like snaps onto a creature as a triggered ability when it enters the battlefield, and you can just go ahead and stifle that triggered ability, which is what Calcano has done there.
This is going to be a brainstorm now for Chase Hansen. He's at 14 life. He has the tools, but Christian Calcano has navigated this beautifully, and he picks up the first game. So game 1 goes to Christian Calcano.
Yeah, nicely done for him. That was a rough game from Chase Hansen's point of view. I mean, he couldn't really find a creature to get in the graveyard early. He had those reanimate spells, but just couldn't make them work. And then Deathrite Shamans just plagued him the entire game. I maybe would have liked to see Chase try to make something happen a little bit earlier in the game, just before those Deathrite Shamans got so active. But really tough situation. To know when to go all in or when to try to hold out and maybe look for an Izzet Charm or something like that. So tough game to navigate.
It's so tough to navigate those spots just because if you go all in brick, you just feel like I could have done something
especially
else,
psychologically. It's the top 8 of the tournament. You want to feel like you're doing all that you can do to maximize your chances to win. And, sometimes being reckless, even if it's the best expectation value move. I shouldn't say reckless. I should say,
risky.
Taking a risk, right? You're trying to make something happen before the window closes.
It can be really hard to pull the trigger on that. It really can. Our other match going on is Brian DeMars, and he's playing Jarvis, right?
Yeah, so this is Brian DeMars with Jeskai Miracles, Blue, White, Red Miracles versus Jarvis Yu playing lands. I guess new age lands, kind of.
Right.
The old lands decks, they would call them like 42 lands or 40 however many lands. This is a little bit sleeker than that, I guess, with the addition of Thespian Stage fairly recently, as far as Legacy is concerned. Jarvis capable of some really, really aggressive plays that we saw earlier on in the tournament. So here's a look at our top 8 bracket.
You can see how things have developed here. Jeez, the red strike through is raw.
Yeah. You are out.
You want to avoid that one. Christian Calcano, of course, playing Chase, and as Ian just outlined for us, Brian DeMars versus Jarvis Yu. Finals are going to come up after that, and we're going to have our winner. I've been saying it all weekend, but these Legacy GPs are so important for the Legacy community, as this is the highest level of play that you can play Legacy at. Routinely, we get a couple of these a year here in North America. There's usually a couple outside of North America as well, but they don't come up that often. And the Legacy community is one of the most passionate, tight-knit groups in Magic.
For sure, yeah.
And they love their format, and this is their chance to come show it off on a big stage.
Yeah, this is like the Super Bowl or big holiday or whatever for the Legacy players. Totally. I know I used to feel that way as a player myself. Even when I wasn't super into Magic, this was the one tournament I would make sure I made time for every year. Meaning the one or two North American Legacy GPs every year. And this one is, really well attended. We have almost 2,000 players playing in the main event here this weekend. Many more players here just to socialize and spectate and play in side events. And the energy has been really high all weekend. It's been a long weekend for sure, Marshall. We've had a lot of, long rounds, grindy games, Sensei's Dividing Top, Miracles matches. But the energy has remained high the whole way through, and we have a really exciting top 4 different decks.
I love it.
Can't wait to see how things play out.
Yeah, so the decks, just to recap what we have here, right, is we've got Reanimator and Grixis Delver, which is what we're going to watch game 2 of next, and then we've got Jeskai Miracles. This is also Countertop, is another name for the deck. We've seen this one quite a bit. In fact, this was one of the most popular decks in the room over the course of the weekend. And then Jarvis attacking with a deck that was certainly not one of the most popular decks in the room with this kind of his take on lands. And it's really exciting. Legacy gets touted a lot for how diverse it is, and it turns out it's very diverse.
Yes,
look at our top 4 completely different approaches to the format. We've got a hardcore control deck. We've got a tempo deck that's trying to kind of be tempo, aggro, mana denial style. We've got Reanimator, which is of course graveyard recursion deck, and then one that uses lands to win the game.
Yeah.
So just 4 totally different takes, really showcasing just a small portion of the diversity you get in Legacy.
Yeah, I totally agree. We have had some core decks throughout the weekend. We've seen a bunch of Delver variants, a lot of Miracles, Sneak and Show, and some old favorites like that. Shardless Bug, another one that's been really popular, the various Abrupt Decay decks. But then you also have all these, sort of one-off specialist kind of decks. We saw Alurin earlier, and in particular, it stood out to me watching Jarvis Yu play his lands deck. He is an expert at that deck. It's
super
very
fast.
complicated, tons of interactions, but he plays it just really, really quickly and magnificently. A lot of expertise there.
Yeah, that was fun to watch for sure.
So,
all right, game 2. Looks like it's just underway here. Hapless Researcher once again for Chase Hansen on turn 1. And that's not bad, right? I was kind of tongue-in-cheek joking that he had 2 of them in the first game. But, it isn't bad at all. It really does start to get things moving forward for him. And it's a decent 1-mana play for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, you put this card in your deck because you want to draw it and cast it on turn 1.
Yeah.
And get your engine going here. So, all according to plan so far for Chase Hansen. Taking a look as he rifles through his hand there. I saw a Careful Study and an Is It Charm.
Okay.
Among other things. It doesn't look like he has reanimation spells and a creature to reanimate. Hard to see.
Jeez, and
but there's that Deathrite
what he doesn't
Shaman.
want to see here, right?
Yeah, thankfully this time around Chase has the Is It Charm, and I imagine that's one of the main reasons he put this card in his deck. Now, Is It Charm's super flexible.
He doesn't have red mana. Oh, wait,
okay, so here's Abrupt Decay. Yeah, that's a fine answer to Deathrite Shaman as well.
And the old Researcher beatdown plan again.
Looks like, I think he does have red mana in Badlands there.
Oh, you're right.
So that could have been an option for him. But the thing with Is It Charm is it also doubles as a discard outlet, so his draw 2 and discard 2
draw
mode.
From Calcano.
Wow, a second Deathrite Shaman and Wasteland.
Takes him off of black mana, at least from Calcano's seat. Like you said, he's got a Badlands here, so he's okay.
And there's the Is It Charm.
There's the Is It Charm.
Yeah, so powerful start from Calcano. Really the cards that he wants to...
Oh, he's going to daze it here, though.
Wow.
So what you saw was Calcano almost put Deathrite in the bin thinking that it was going to be another copy
of Abrupt Decay,
that he can't counter. He's like, wait, I'm allowed to counter that?
Yeah.
I will take you up on that, sir.
So, okay, so the Wasteland I didn't think was going to be that relevant because Chase had lands 3 and 4 in his hand, but allowing the daze to hit there was actually really, really important. So Deathrite Shaman sticks, and that's rough. I mean, Chase had the 2 answers to Deathrite Shamans early in the game there, but he probably doesn't have that many more left in his deck, and he's going to need to find one soon. Otherwise, it's going to be really hard for him to get his game plan started. Now, it is worth noting, many Reanimator decks do sideboard Show and Tell to combat graveyard hate in post-sideboard games, but it does not look like Chase has that option, so he's very much in on the graveyard. And he's going to want to find another Abrupt Decay or Is It Charm to take care of that Deathrite Shaman.
Yeah, the double Deathrite Shaman's a big deal here.
And second Wasteland from Calcano.
But Chase is just staying ahead of it. Playing a land here.
Now, Calcano's probably a little bit nervous this turn. He did opt to Wasteland instead of playing a colored mana source to keep the Deathrite Shaman active. And so, from Calcano's perspective, he's maybe worried about Chase drawing into whichever piece he was missing, whether it was a creature or a reanimate spell, and then using the Hapless Researcher to get the creature in the graveyard and reanimating it. But it looks like from our perspective and what we know, Chase does not have the tools to do that.
Currently, but he does have a...
I think
Careful Study in his hand, I think.
He has a Careful Study, and I think the black card might be Entomb. It's a little hard to see as he's flicking past it quickly.
As well.
So, looks like an abundance of ways to maybe get a creature into the graveyard if he draws one, but still no reanimation spell.
And doesn't have quite enough mana to make it work, so he's just going to pass the turn back. Calcano's now going to replay that Tropical from before.
And we'll see now if Calcano just leaves his shields up the entire game here and just refuses to tap out with that Deathrite Shaman, or if he opens up a turn window where he wants to deploy a Tarmogoyf for a Delver or something like that, and maybe give Chase a one-turn window to put something together. I would like to see Chase try to seize an opportunity like that and make a move if Calcano does tap out, but it looks like Calcano's got enough mana to leave that Deathrite up.
Yeah, that thing is just such a pain for Chase. Dealt with the first one, had an answer for the second one, couldn't quite get it off the table. There's a Stifle now as well for Calcano. Perhaps a little late, and the fact that Chase knows about it will hurt as well. But, being able to just straight up counter Animate Dead's a pretty big deal.
Yeah, I mean...
just take that thing off the table for blue.
The Reanimate decks usually only play 1 or 2 Animate Deads, and Stifle doesn't work against some of the other reanimation spells.
Reanimate itself being the premier.
Yeah, it's usually Reanimate and Exhume are the 2 that you're playing the most copies of, usually 4 of each, and then 1 or 2 Animate Deads to supplement it. So it's particularly relevant in that last game because Chase needed to rely on the Animate Dead, but this game he does not have it. I think he has an Exhume instead in hand.
Yeah, and you are he's got 4 of each of those premier and then just 2 of the Animate Dead. All right, well here we go. Entomb for Chase Hansen. That's Iona, but how does this work out with the Deathrite Shaman sitting there?
So I think this is an end of turn Entomb, and because Chase has Exhume in his hand, Exhume, I don't believe, targets.
That's correct.
So if he can get 2 creatures into his graveyard and cast Exhume, the Deathrite can only take out 1, and he gets the other one. Basically, he gets Calcano's choice of the 2.
Gotcha.
And that at least gets him somewhere. And I see a Grizzlebrand in his hand.
He just drew a Grizzlebrand, and he can get that into the yard with his Hapless Researcher or the Careful Study. So, yeah, this is not good news for Calcano.
So
one of these 2 huge creatures is going to be on the battlefield here if Calcano can't mess with this.
Sacks the Hapless Researcher.
Can he stifle that?
Yes, he can. And I think that's why Chase paused for a moment.
But Calcano did not stifle it.
Calcano did not stifle it. I think in general I agree. I mean, it's just 1 loot effect. Chances are that Chase has other ways to get cards in the graveyard. I mean, he already entombed once.
Which he does.
Yeah. And Calcano doesn't know that Exhume is coming. But here comes Exhume, and the reason this is so huge, Calcano picks it up to read it. Exhume says each player puts a creature card from his or her graveyard on the battlefield. So it does not target any of the creatures involved here. It's just when it resolves, if a creature remains, each player chooses one to put back in. So Calcano can respond with 1 Deathrite activation, removing the most threatening creature, which presumably is Grizzlebrand here. But that'll still leave an Iona in the graveyard, or vice versa, for Chase. And assuming this Exhume resolves, one of those creatures is going to come back and enter the battlefield.
I see that Calcano has a Daze in his hand, but Chase has left up that Badlands. So it would take double Daze to get this Exhume countered, and he'd love to counter this thing. Now, if Calcano does have a way to deal with either of the threats after... Oh, he's got Surgical Extraction here. So he can target one of the threats and then Deathrite the other one, right?
Yeah. I mean, this is it. So I assume this is targeting Grizzlebrand because there are other copies of Grizzlebrand in the deck to remove.
And it would be reasonable to assume that.
Yeah, and Grizzlebrand is just the most threatening of the creatures in the graveyard anyway.
Wow, this sideboard tech here from Christian Calcano is coming up huge. Also going to take a little browse here and see what kind of sideboarding Chase did. Remember, Calcano's the one who's up a game here. And one more quick look just to make sure there's no other Grizzlebrands or surprises in there for him. He also gets to know what's in Chase's hand as a result of this. You know, the crazy part here is that Chase is going to get back the Hapless Researcher, and Calcano's going to get back another Deathrite. It's actually beneficial to him here.
So this is real trouble for Chase Hansen. Not only is he going to be facing down 2 Deathrite Shaman, but also has had his Grizzlebrands and Iona stripped from his deck, which leaves him with just a paltry few reanimation targets left, and they're not ideal ones either. They're like archetype of endurance. Like, he could just get that out and still lose.
Yeah, easily. Yeah, the one that he really has left to lean on is Elishnorn.
Yeah.
That's the one that's left. But he's now facing double Deathrite Shaman. I mean, how is he going to work through that? He's going to have to mow those down just to get to that point.
Oh, here comes Cabal Therapy taking out the 2 reanimates that Christian Calcano has
that's just Calcano using the fact that he knew about those from the Surgical Extraction of all things.
Yeah, I wonder if Calcano's going to take out the Careful Study here too. Probably not. I mean, none of his creatures are
important creature.
Yeah, like even the Delver I think is the least important one of them, and it's a 3-point clock, so I think you're better served just ending the game quickly. So here comes Duress. This is largely irrelevant for Chase Hansen. He can strip away a counterspell. There goes Force of Will.
Yeah, there was a Stifle that he knew about, and now he knows about a Daze, but this has gone downhill sharply for Chase Hansen, and it looks like Calcano is in the driver's seat. I mean, how much is he doing here? He's doing 7 a turn. He just kills him next turn?
Yeah.
Like, Chase is just kind of dead here, right?
Yeah, he knows there's a Careful Study in hand. The only new card Chase can possibly see is off the Hapless Researcher. And so I think Calcano can just go ahead and remove 2 sorceries. Oh no, he doesn't have a second black source. He left up Tropical Island, though.
He can't get one with that Strand?
Well, he can get one with the Strand, but he can't double black activation, untap double black activation.
But he can certainly do it once here.
He can do it once, yeah.
Bring him down to 9.
and then untap, attack for 3 with Delver, takes Chase down to 6, and then at the end of that following turn, that'll be the Deathrite, untap Deathrite.
Yeah, so Chase is going to have a single draw step here.
Yeah, single draw step plus the Careful Study.
Yes.
Plus the Hapless Researcher, which can be stifled also. There's Reanimate.
Reanimate with no targets, at least not in his graveyard. I think you just stifle this, right?
Probably. I don't know. It's kind of a tough decision. Like, you're so likely to win either way. I'm not sure which, opens up the window a little bit wider.
That's going to do it.
Handshake.
Handshake acquired. Christian Calcano into the finals. He moves on past Chase Hansen. Great run for you, Chase. Good work with your Reanimator deck all weekend. He's got a smile on his face. We'll see him at the Pro Tour.
Oh, yeah.
So no hard feelings there. And there's a smile from Calcano.
Yeah, Calcano. He's got to be super happy here. He's a player who I believe missed Platinum by just a point or a couple points last season. Really heartbreaking for him. He's been known as a grinder. He travels a lot. He puts in a ton of time and effort into the Pro Magic scene. And just to fall barely short last season, he's got to be really, really happy starting the season off strong.